The representative of Bangladesh, and now I give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس.
Thank you, Mr. President. Everyone present here is aware, as is the Director General of the IAEA, Mr. Amano, that the issue of nuclear non-proliferation does represent one of the priorities, national priorities of Syria, both in word and action. My country, at a very early date, began its accession to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty back in 1968. So it was in advance compared with, for example, some EU countries who claim to be interested in the non-proliferation regime. However, at the same time, that a number of countries in the EU, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, and Italy, as well, of course, as Turkey, which is a member of NATO. In all these countries, there are nuclear weapons. And this is a flagrant non-respect for the provisions of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Syria has signed the Safeguards Agreement with the agency in 1992, and Syria in 2003, on the 27th of October of that year, when we were members of the Security Council, my country, Syria, on behalf of the Arab group, did submit a draft resolution which is still in blue in the corridors of the Security Council up to this date. Its aim was to establish a nuclear weapons-free zone and a zone free of WMDs in the Middle East. Now, the credibility of our national commitment to the non-proliferation system is clear and unequivocal. Furthermore, that draft resolution was in line with the goals and provisions of the IAEA, but we met the objections of the US delegation in the Security Council. That delegation used the veto against this draft resolution. Some are continuing to deny the fact that the real nuclear threat, the only nuclear threat in the Middle East, is that represented by Israel's possession of nuclear weapons and its means of delivery, even to reach remote areas of that area. Israeli nuclear missiles have a range of 5,000 kilometers. The same individuals continue to deny these facts, and they establish fictitious funds to divert attention from the real Israeli threat to the region's population and that of the world as a whole, because the range of these missiles, which can carry Israeli nuclear weapons, is 5,000 kilometers and above. And so the question is, why and for whom has Israel prepared these nuclear weapons with a range of more than 5,000 kilometers? This is neither an impartial nor an objective approach, and it shows that there are false allegations with regard to establishing a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. If these same European countries have for decades provided weapons to Israel, which has allowed them to achieve nuclear power status, and also the procurement of submarines which can launch nuclear missiles. These submarines were offered to Israel, given to Israel. Europeans have done everything to, including the absurd, to ensure that Israel's nuclear options are not considered within the NPT review conference in 2010 in New York. They did everything to ensure that the 2012 conference was a failure, to allow Israel to continue to develop nuclear weapons at the cost of the security of the people of the region. This demonstrates the selective nature and the double standards that are in play. Mr. President, the Security Council and the IAEA have not condemned the military Israeli aggression in 2007, nor have they condemned the refusal of Israel to cooperate with the agency and to allow its inspectors to verify the source of probable pollution coming from Israeli nuclear material and the pollution around Deir ez-Zor. The continuing failure of Israel to cooperate with the IAEA and the continuing development of their military nuclear capacity beyond any international control is clear. Many appeals have been made to ensure that the Middle East should be a nuclear weapons-free zone, but all these appeals have been ignored. This undermines the credibility of the non-proliferation regime, and it's a threat to the stability and security of the countries and people of the Middle East. All this has been documented, and we are aware of this. The IAEA knows it. We would have liked the Director General of the IAEA to cover these points in his statement rather than using expressions which are inconclusive. This is shown by what he has said. He said it's quite possible, and such expressions. Mr. President, the member countries are committed to respect the statutes of the IAEA. The US should have informed the IAEA of the information that the United States possessed before the destruction of a building rather than several months later. The same applies to Israel, which did not provide information to the IAEA if this information is creditworthy. There was a military aggression against Syrian territory, and there was also infiltration of Turkey's airspace. The IAEA has not intervened pursuant to its mandate, nor has the agency taken its actions under its prerogatives and responsibilities in the face of this Israeli violation of its international commitments. Ladies and gentlemen, I should read a paragraph in the memoir published by the Director General, the previous Director General of the IAEA, Mr. El Baradei. This paragraph is in page 128, 129 of that book. It's entitled, in English,
Nuclear Diplomacy.
The Age of Disappointment, Nuclear Diplomacy in These Sad Times. Now I will read in English this paragraph.
One of the strangest and most striking examples of nuclear hypocrisy, multilateral and multifaceted, must surely be Israel's bombing of the Deir ez-Zor installation in Syria in September 2007 and the aftermath of that attack. Speculation began almost immediately that the site had housed a nuclear facility. Syria denied the accusations. Israel and the United States remained officially silent. Although American officials talked anonymously on the subject to the media, I spoke out strongly, Mr. El-Baradei said, noting that any country with information indicating that the bombed facility was nuclear was under a legal obligation to report it to the IAEA. But no one came forward with such a report. For the 6 weeks following the bombing, the most crucial period in terms of our seeing inside the facility, we were unable to obtain any high-resolution imagery from commercial satellites. انتهى الاقتباس.
End of quote. Now, most of these conclusions by the IAEA with regard to the attack on the Deir ez-Zor are based on these photographs and the analyses provided by the CIA. So this raises a lot of questions as to the credibility of this information drawn by the IAEA and the documents that underlie it, since they were submitted by a country which has an anti-Syrian agenda, as you all know, of course, and also taking into account the precedents in the area. Precedents related to the Iraqi dossier, the disastrous Iraqi dossier, which led to a disaster, the invasion of Iraq and the destruction of its infrastructure and the proliferation of terrorism in that country and the region. So what was the outcome of this in 2008 when the UNSCOM report was hidden? It was concealed and will only be open after 60 years. Why? Because that report does confirm that the committee did not find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Now, the most recent report of the Director General of the IAEA includes inconclusive conclusions. They are based on information which lack credibility. They are not exhaustive. And this assessment contradicts totally the assessment by his predecessor, Mr. al-Baradei, and this leads to questions as to the impartiality. So we'd like to ask the Director General to answer these questions and to bring clarification to the issue. Mr. President, it is quite clear that there's a mixture between the legal commitment of a member pursuant to the Safeguards Agreement, between that on the one hand, and the voluntary procedures to accede to the supplementary protocol. There's no legal basis to this, so we call upon all countries to give cover to Israeli nuclear weapons, and we call upon the Director General of the IAEA to do so. We ask the agency, what did you do to implement Security Council resolution relative to this issue, which was adopted more than 30 years ago? Allow me to quote part of this resolution in English, in paragraph 5 of this resolution.
أقرأ باللغة الإنجليزية.
I'll read it in English.
Upon Israel urgently to place its nuclear facilities under the safeguards of the International Atomic Energy Agency. كان هذا الكلام الطارئ قبل 30 So this was 30 years ago, and Israel has not done anything since then. In conclusion, Mr. President, a very important platform for disarmament, I'm referring to the International Research Center in Stockholm, has referred to 6 points on the Israeli nuclear program. But it didn't say a word about the Syrian program. So I'd like to reiterate from this platform my appeal to the Director General of the IAEA. I'd like him to read this chapter and draw the appropriate lessons. I ask him to take action straight away with regard to Israeli nuclear weapons which threaten the people of the entire region, and the implementation of the IAEA resolutions itself and Security Council resolutions in this regard, with regard to Israeli nuclear weapons. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic